Hello, all the beasties. Welcome to the Lair. How are y'all doing tonight? How are all my beasties doing? Everybody check in. Lair check-in time.
Come on. Cookie says he's doing okay.
Hold on one second. So what's going on with everybody this evening?
We finally got the local ISP to cooperate with me. So rather than the cell modem that I was on earlier today, making everything go nuts, we have a more stable connection.
That's good. That is always good.
It's gonna put a stress on the budget if the required budgetary items do not show up on time. But we're gonna go with that. Explaining would be a little much. I'll tell you later.
Okay. What else is going on, Lair lovers?
Hey, will call and send.
Let me hold on. Peek over here. Okay, let's see. Hey, Sin. Hey, will call. Hey, Anthony. Anthony, how did everything go with the parent? Oh, you got all the info and status. That's good, Anthony. I was worried for you. I was worried for you. So I'm glad you're less worried. So we're going to give everybody a few minutes to meander on in.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if when Patty's going to turn up. She should. Kind of hope so,
Yeah.
but she seems like she was going to be. She's been kind of busy over the last few days. Then she wandered out. She wandered out of my live stream a little on the other side. That's okay.
Hi, Patty.
Oh, speaking of the devil, she shall appear. Hi.
I was trying to convince an inebriated Natalie Wisco to join us. But she was like, no, there's too many margaritas.
Oh.
And I adore her, so, But I laughed at that one. I was like, I don't know. You drunk and me in a mood could be a thing.
It could be a thing, yeah. That would be hilarious, honestly.
Oh, I'm sure there will come a time. I'm sure there will come a time.
Yep.
So, has anybody been watching the Murdaugh stuff yet? I know opening arguments happened today, and it's really, hey, Bone, it's really going to kick off tomorrow, but this evidentiary hearing drove me batty.
What do you mean too many margaritas is an oxymoron? We don't. There's no such thing.
Well, Kyle, what do you think about this? Am I the only one that's just like, this is special? The circus music is appropriate at this point. That might be an understatement at this point.
Yeah, just a tiny bit.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull up this feed, and we're gonna start watching. Know the story yet, but haven't heard any of the court case yet. Okay, so let me get this set up real quick, and then I will enlighten some of the silliness in all of this. One second, guys. No. You. What is this thing? You should not. Why are you having issues? It's sharing there. So I should be able to full.
Yeah, just like that.
Right, but now I can't see it full screen over. Like usually I can. Oh, that'll work for now.
Yeah.
Usually I can full screen it on that side and then it'll pop up.
I'm surprised
I
he didn't try and defend himself.
I'm not. There's no way he can. So let me.
He just seems to have that kind of an ego.
Oh, there's a lot of egos involved in this. Not only does he have an ego in his family, but what is. Just so you know, I'm like losing my mind already. It's been 5 minutes, and I've lost it.
Oh.
No, his attorney, who has been parts of like everything for like 50 years, is just as much of an ego. Okay, so the background to this is right now what I'm pulling up for you guys is the evidentiary hearing. The defense does not want some of this firearms evidence to be heard.
I wonder why.
So we're having an evidentiary hearing where we are going to absolutely grill the firearms guy. And the questions the defense and the prosecution are asking, some of it I just think their firearms expert might not be the greatest at explaining. Some of it I think is games. So let's see if we can make sense of it. Because I've seen a few people watching it and everybody's like, I don't understand. I'm going to need you to make that make sense. And what is this man trying to get out of it? So let's go. Let's watch this go down in flames.
Audio?
Oh wait. I guess I have to take it off Chipmunk.
It might be good. I'm not hearing it at all, so.
You didn't hear it at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I know what we can do.
Chipmunk or bust, but no, I couldn't hear it.
I know why. Hold on. I know why. Hold on.
Two gerbil accounts?
What?
Nothing. I'm being weird. Two Google accounts.
Well, it's not two Google accounts. One is my personal and then one's my channel one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hold on, guys. Give me 1 second. And I should be able to do this the right way. Hush! Computer, I'm not in the mood for you. You do not start with me. I am going to sell somebody at the rate this day is going. Okay. Let's go over here. There we go. Okay. So, guys, let me know on how we're doing volume-wise. So let's get this train wreck started.
During the trial. Absolutely understand that, Your Honor. And again, I recognize that we were attempting to perhaps identify those issues and bring those issues because of the complexity of everything to the court's attention. And I certainly understand and recognize, and that's the typical manner in which we would do that, is to have those issues addressed as we move through the trial.
That deals with that issue.
Thank you, Your Honor.
It leaves a ballistics issue.
Up, here we go.
Your Honor, I believe at this time we can move to that. I'm going to turn the presentation of evidence over to Mr. Fernandez, who will call Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. State will call Paul Greer.
For the record, spell your last name.
For someone going through what he's going through, Murdaugh doesn't seem very pressed at all.
I'm not sure which one Murdaugh is.
He was the one in plaid,
Plaid.
chewing on his glasses.
Oh, jeez.
My name is Paul Greer, Greer.
With whom you're currently employed?
I'm employed at the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, which is commonly
SLED.
known as SLED.
All right, Mr. Greer, for purposes of this council hearing, would you please just describe for the court your educational background and qualifications in the area of firearms identification?
Yes, sir. I received a Bachelor's of Science in Biological Sciences from the University of South Carolina. At the completion of my collegiate career, I began an internship at SLED in the Firearm Tool Mart Department. I was appointed as a firearms examiner, a forensic scientist in the laboratory in 2014, where I began the SLED Firearm Tool Mart course of instruction. This is an extensive training program that's conducted under the supervision of other court-qualified examiners. During that time and extensive period, I conducted many written and practical examinations, conducted many microscopic comparisons, and assisted other examiners prep their cases. At the conclusion of my training, I was then given a comprehensive final exam that included mock casework and was able to begin casework on my own after successfully completing that.
We do need to turn it down a little bit.
And Mr. Greer, would you please describe for us the field of, broad overview is fine for purposes of today's hearing, but an overview of what firearms identification is and the expertise that you developed.
Chad, I need
Yes,
you
sir.
to clear. Okay. you
Firearms
think
identification
okay.
is a discipline of forensic science in which our main objective is to examine fired ammunition components in order to determine if they were fired by a specific firearm.
By a Pacific firearm?
I don't see any
Okay.
firearms out here.
And are you a member of any organizations, or have you obtained any additional trainings or certifications as it relates to firearms identification?
Yes, sir. I am a member of the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners, which is also known as AFTI. I've been a member of that organization since approximately 2015. AFTI is an international organization that I believe has approximately 1,200 members of folks in the field who do firearms identification and tool mark identification. This also includes technical leaders from the academic world and also from other aspects.
I have a question.
Thank you. And if you would, please describe the process that you go through and the training that you go through in order to become a forensic firearms and tool examiner at
How
SLED.
important is that?
Sure. That refers back to that course.
I can't hear you, Croco. What did you say?
This society has 1,200 people worldwide. I mean, that doesn't sound like a very large international organization for firearms and tool marks.
Meh. We'll see how much that matters.
Course of instruction that I completed, that approximately 3-year or so program, and where I conducted all the microscopic comparisons, looked
Patty,
at
I don't know.
things on the
A few of the
microscope,
things
test fire
issues I
firearms,
saw
observed
were just
cartridge
his
cases that were
inability to
fired out of the
communicate
same firearm,
information clearly.
cartridge cases that were fired out
But
of
we'll
different
see.
firearms,
I stopped watching.
bullets as well. Learning about firearms, manufacturing process of those firearms, and how that relates to the range of conclusions that we issue as firearms examiners. During that time, I also completed those written and practical tests. Some of those tests include studies that have been conducted throughout the United States and worldwide to include consecutively manufactured bullets and cartridge cases. I've completed those, successfully passed those. At the end of my training, I was given that final exam and also some mock casework in which I was able to complete and successfully pass.
Thank you. And have you had a chance, I know you mentioned you're part of the AFTE organization, AFTE. Have you had an opportunity to attend additional conferences and trainings that they would put on on an annual basis?
Yes, sir, I have. When I'm able or training is available, I attend their annual conference. That is a large conference where materials presented about new technologies in the
Pokemon,
field
this
or
is- this
updates,
isn't
new
just the expert.
procedures that may be
The
coming
bigger
in
issue
order to do
is this
things
is
or
an
arrive
evidentiary hearing,
with
and some of
different
the
items.
stuff that gets
But I
said
attend those
in this
conferences when able.
evidentiary hearing is
I also
insanity.
participate in other training as necessary, such as our Glock armor certification when
Oh, yay.
when I'm able to do that.
Glock.
AFTE also has other things they
Yay.
provide. Webinars, if I'm able to participate in those, I will take part in that.
And in order to become a firearm and tool examiner with SLED, are you given certifications and tests that must be passed, both competency tests and proficiency tests?
Yes, sir. Part of our quality control at SLED, SLED, the laboratory is accredited by ANAB, which is the ANSI National Accreditation Board. That follows the standards set forth by ISO 17025, which is an international accrediting set of standards. And we follow that. And within that, we have a SLED quality control manual that requires before we're able to participate or be authorized to perform work, we are competency tested and deemed competent to do that. Also, in addition, each year we're proficiency tested to make sure that we are maintaining our
Why does
competency.
this dude remind me of the
Mr.
guy in
Greer,
New Mexico giving his
Specifically relating
credentials?
to the purpose for which you were called today.
Like this
In
dude is
describing
just channeling
the
New
area of
Mexico
firearms
firearm guy.
identification, would you please tell the court a little bit about the methodology that goes into that and whether that methodology has been subjected to both being published in journals or subjected to peer review? Would you please talk about that whole process and the culture?
Sure. Firearms identification has been around for years. During that time, there's been many studies that have proven the
Guys,
reliability
let's
of
have a
firearms
drinking
identification.
game every time he says
Those studies are published in articles through AFTE, such as the AFTE Journal. Those studies using a scientific method are
You gonna tell us the
published
scientific
in
method
the
next?
AFTE Journal, or Journal of Forensic Sciences would be another one that could be included. And those are peer reviewed. Those are looked at by members of the academia or firearms identification, other examiners. Those are reviewed and those are published in those two journals for sure.
Do you know what year AFTE was founded, for how long this organization has been around?
I believe AFTE was founded in 1969.
All right. And discussing the methodology of peer review, you indicated that the journals, that the information that's published in journals, that's in fact subject to peer review, meaning other
So now we're going to
people in
explain
the
what
field
peer
or
review
folks in the
is,
scientific
because
community are
nobody's
able
taken
to
a scientific
review it and
research
analyze it.
class.
Is that your
Like
understanding?
a
Yes,
scientific
sir. That's
research
my understanding. They would be
research
able to
methodology
review
class.
the article as
Okay,
it's
cool.
presented prior to publication, and review what has taken place in that article or that
Let's learn
experiment.
about research
and
methodology that anyone should have learned about in
share
their
their
freshman
thoughts
year
with
of
that
college if they're a
process.
science major.
Those articles are then, peer reviewed and issued in those journals.
These articles are not only information, but it's also sometimes and frequently an examination of some study that was performed. Is that your understanding of these articles and review of those articles?
That's correct.
In addition to the methodology and peer review publications in your field, could you please discuss the specifics of that peer review process and methodologies in SLED in particular?
Sure. As part of our quality control process at SLED, again, we are accredited by ANAB. We just received our reaccreditation. We're accredited every 4 years during that cycle. and we just received our reaccreditation. And that again follows the ISO 17025 standards. We also, on top of that, have the SLED quality manual, which we follow closely to make sure that we're adhering to those procedures. And as part of that, we have a firearms departmental manual that gives us guidance in how to perform our actual casework, how to perform our examinations with the evidence.
This guy
In that
is a
process, in
raw
that quality
academic.
control
Yeah,
peer
but
review,
this is Murdaugh.
our
This is the one
casework at
accused of
SLED is
everything.
100% micro-verified. And that means that another qualified examiner will look at the evidence, arrive at their conclusions, and agree or disagree with me. For those to be reported, that examiner, we will, if he or she agrees with my results, those will then be reported. The case file itself is also undergoes a
Not
technical
really,
administrative review
Anthony.
process as part of the quality control and peer review procedures.
And as part of your in-house peer review, is that a blind review that is
You
that
have
is
to
performed?
establish
Yes, sir, that
yourself
is.
and give your
And
credentials.
speaking
to be
of
considered
the
an expert
organization,
witness.
sort of the accreditation organization, ANAB, is that an
Hey,
international
Nick, does he not
organization?
remind you of the dude from New
The
Mexico?
ANAB stand is
Like, he
in
reminds
the
me of
United States,
Firearms
but they
dude from New
follow the
Mexico.
international
Except
standards
that
set forth
guy
by
hasn't-
ISO.
has not yet
And then the second layer would be, so
showcase
SLED
it.
itself, the organization,
Oh,
the law
it'll
enforcement
get
agency,
worse.
SLED is accredited by ANAB.
The Forensic Services Laboratory is.
And then beyond that, SLED Forensics has a quality
back in a
assurance
couple
manual,
minutes.
which is followed by your lab. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then beyond that, the SLED's firearm department has its own manual. Is that correct?
That is also correct.
All right. Has the field of firearms identification been applied in previous similar situations?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, let's start with sort of the big picture, the broad picture. Where and how is it typically applied? This field of study.
Firearms identification has been around for years. Since the early 1900s, we have been evolving on firearms identification.
And it's used in
My
court
man,
cases across the world.
You're
Is that
not
correct?
helping yourself.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Specifically relating to your personal experience, have you been sworn as an expert in firearms identification in previous court cases?
I
Yes, sir, I have.
have.
And providing live testimony for a trial?
Yes, sir.
And approximately how many cases was that?
I've testified in state and federal courts approximately 25 times.
Okay, well, it's better than last dude's
Certified or
three.
firearms identification examiners have been utilized in, as far as you're aware, per your organizations, have been utilized in court cases across the globe. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir.
I know you mentioned that this field of study has been around since the early 1900s. Does this applied science use the scientific method when applying
Oh,
you know,
Jesus.
your information you gather and then your opinion that you render?
Yes, sir. It does follow a scientific method and approach in order to conduct our examinations.
All right, could you please describe what the
Seriously,
scientific method is as applied to
Let's
this
describe the
forensic field?
scientific method.
Sure. As far as applying a scientific approach, when we conduct our examinations or we're looking at
Why?
firearms as
Why are
in
we
the
doing
scientific
this?
method, one thing when we're working a case or if you're looking at it in this manner, you may ask, you form a hypothesis. Are these
This is
cartridge
not
cases fired
specifically
by
relevant to
this
the
firearm?
firearms guy.
So that would be our hypothesis.
So
we would evaluate
Why we're
the conditions under that, do research, and then we would actually do experiment. In this case, this example, what we would do is test fire that firearm using similar ammunition that we're comparing it to. We would determine our conclusions
there's no
and,
jury. This is an evidentiary motion.
and arrive at those
we
conclusions.
just
Then that can
no.
be also applied to casework. If I
Cookie
receive a
Run,
case,
they didn't ask
I
for them
look at
to
all the evidence,
stipulate to
look at
it,
the characteristics on
and
that, examine the
what
firearm,
they are
test fire that firearm.
trying to keep
I've already
out
compared
is
those
why they're
cartridge
not
cases
going
to
to
each other and
stipulate to
determine
it.
that the
And
characteristics
this
of that
is just
firearm can be
stupid.
compared to those cartridge cases.
What they're
Compare
trying,
determine a conclusion.
He's
In order
dumb,
to determine,
but
and
some of
then
this is he just
our
doesn't
peer
know how
review
to.
process kicks in. In order to
explain
determine
things.
whether that is reproducible or the repeatability of that scientific procedure, that's where our peer review process would come in. Another qualified examiner would come in and look at that. And if he arrives at the same conclusion, then that method has been deemed repeatable and reliable. Thank you.
In the 25 times that you've testified in both state and federal court, has your testimony been ruled admissible, meaning you could render your opinion to the jury?
Yes, sir, it has.
And were any limitations placed on your testimony in the 25 times you've appeared?
There were none.
All right. The field of this forensic field of firearms identification, could you please describe the quality control? I know you have mentioned some, but could you please describe the quality control procedures that are in place governing this body of work?
This
At SLED,
dude.
again, we're accredited under the ANAB policy, which guides us under those standards in our quality control manual. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What quality control procedures are in place, both in this field of study in general, but also as it relates specifically to how SLED operates? I think you meant, first of all, what's the international accreditation that SLED is, the forensic lab is a part of?
Yes, sir. That is the ISO 17025. So accredited laboratories around the United States, if they are accredited by ANAB, they are all working with those same standards that we are at
my
SLED. They're
Lord.
all adhering to those quality control procedures. Additionally, those who are accredited under the ISO 17025 internationally are also accredited by those same standards and follow those same quality control procedures.
And in order to obtain that accreditation and more importantly, maintain that accreditation, how much, what's the inspection process, both
No,
internal
Pokemon,
and
he
external?
isn't. He's the
Describe
cure
it,
for
sir.
insomnia.
For the ANAB accreditation, we have an on-site visit every 4 years where auditors come and examine our casework, examine our facilities in order to make sure that we are complying with the requirements set forth by their governing body. They review everything that
I
we
know where they're
offer as
going with
far as
this, but I
casework,
don't know why we're
make sure that
doing
we're
that
complying with our
this
own policies
now.
and as well as theirs.
Like, we could have just stipulated
As far as
to
internally, we
him
also
and then
complete
gone
internal
on to the
audits each year
evidence.
where other departments will audit and make sure that there's compliance within each
You're not
department.
arguing against him. You're
And although
arguing
redundant,
against some of
please
the
describe
ballistic
to us the SLED
evidence.
quality control manual that's followed.
This is ridiculous.
Yes, sir.
Could you describe it? What essentially is it and how do you follow it?
Yes, sir. The SLED quality control manual follows those standards that are given by ANAB. It follows that so that way the SLED laboratory has strict guidelines in which we follow in order to make sure that we stay in line with our accreditation procedures and policies.
And if you would, again, although I know you explained it previously, but please describe the firearms department manual that's followed.
Yes, sir. The Firearms manual is a set
I
of
am
procedures
going
that we
to
follow
throw an
as
OSHA
examiners
manual
in
at
order
somebody.
to give us instruction and information on how to complete our
Anthony, he
examinations,
comes across as
how to
nervous
handle
because he keeps
firearms-related
saying,
evidence and tool-not-related evidence.
He's also
It also
coming across
includes
as nervous
some
because he
terminology
knows
that we
what's
use
coming.
within our case
He
files.
knows what
It
piece
gives
of
us
evidence they're
guidance to make sure that we
questioning
are
and what
all
they're
operating
trying to keep out.
consistently and within those guidelines of the quality control
And
procedures.
And if you would also please describe the code of ethics that is
This
applied
is
to
just, like,
yourself and your
painful.
colleagues within the laboratory.
Yes, sir. Each employee at the SLED laboratory, including myself, signs a code of ethics that we must abide by each year. And that is a code of ethics for the
Well, before everybody
workplace
falls
in our
asleep,
forensic
go ahead and do the
laboratory,
like,
and that is
subscribe,
recorded within
share
our quality
YouTube
control
things,
procedures.
please.
An
We're
additional
getting
quality
close to
control
800.
procedure would be the micro-verification
Sorry,
process.
folks, I'm
Briefly
back.
describe that for us again.
Yes, sir.
800
Before
would be really
conclusion is rendered.
We're coming
the
up on
report,
800, so you know.
Each examiner will
Do the
examine
like,
the evidence,
subscribe,
arrive at a
share, do the
conclusion,
YouTubey things
write those conclusions down.
before he puts
At
you to
that
sleep.
point, another
Oh,
court
Jesus.
qualified examiner will examine the evidence and arrive separately at their conclusions
and he's not very
to
dynamic.
create a blind verification.
Ugh.
If those conclusions are the same, then the reviewing examiner will sign off on those conclusions so that a report can be drafted. As also part of that process, the entire case file and report are reviewed for a technical review and administrative review before the report is released.
And in order to become a forensic examiner with SLED, is that person required to pass a competency test?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you in fact passed that competency test?
Yes, sir.
And are there also proficiency tests that are required each year?
Yes, sir. We do take a proficiency test within our discipline each year.
All right. Please just, we're going to talk a little bit about, but I'd like you to describe how the area of firearms identification is consistent with recognized scientific laws and scientific procedures. So I
Oh
think
my
you mentioned
God.
before, but is firearms identification, do you all operate under the general rubric of the scientific method?
Yes.
Of course,
Again,
Why are
describe
we
the scientific
even,
method and how it
why
relates,
is
maybe
this
how it
even
applies
a
to
thing?
the firearms identification, beginning with essentially a hypothesis or a hypothesis and then, proceeding along to where it becomes a theory. Could you please describe that process?
Yes, sir. You would look at your evidence, or in this case, if you're just doing an experiment, and try and determine a hypothesis. Are these cartridge cases fired by this gun, or are these bullets fired by this gun? You would do the research to determine what materials you
I'm
may
gonna
need.
beat him with an ocean
In this
manual.
case, you may use like ammunition that
Ugh.
you're trying to compare to. You would examine those characteristics to make sure that the
Amazing,
comparison
isn't
should be completed. At that point, you would begin your experiment. In this case, you would test fire the firearm. You would compare those cartridge cases from the firearm with each other, and also with those cartridge cases or bullets that are questioned, and arrive at conclusions. At that point, you would conclude your experiment, issue your conclusions, and open up for any discussion. That is similar to casework in the fact that's a very similar method as what we use there. For
You are a lab rat.
repeatability and reproducibility of that, at that point, that experiment could be passed off to others in the
Are
field
we
of
gonna go
firearms
with the drinking
identification or
game?
within
Because if we do,
academia
we're all gonna be
to
dead.
review and comment. They could use the evidence or the cartridge cases and conduct their own experiment with it and see if they arrive at those same conclusions. If they do, then that theory has been proven and considered
No.
reproducible and reliable.
Sir, you are not.
And generally speaking, in
You
the
need to
applied
learn to
sciences,
talk better.
is it important that the test be as
You're
accurate as
working with
possible?
a hypothesis.
The test you're trying to reproduce in the lab.
Yes, sir.
Is it important that it's reliable, meaning you can rely on the procedures that you're implementing and the results you're trying to obtain?
Yes, sir.
And is it important that it's repeatable,
Sure,
meaning
Pokemon
you
doesn't
could
have enough
repeat
record
that
now
same
for that.
process, or your peer review colleague could repeat the same process? That's
Steve, we'd
an
all be
important
dead by
component
now.
of this
Yeah.
examination.
Yes, sir. That would be an important component of the scientific process.
In addition to all the scientific method and the processes you just described, again, this field of study, this applied science, is it also published in journals and academia for peer review?
Yes, sir, it is.
I understand
and
when
are
they
you
were
familiar with
grilling the
some of the
blood
literature out there,
spatter
having reviewed it
experts because
yourself?
they're questioning
Yes, sir.
that science, but firearms science and forensics
Thank
is
you for
not
some indulgence.
questioned as junk science like some people do with blood spatter. So why we're going down this same path is beyond me. And I know what evidence they want to keep out because I saw a few minutes of this. But Jesus, this is painful.
So all we've done now is establish that he's a
Mr. Thank you for answering my questions. I do have a couple other areas I'd like to ask you about, specifically relating to some of the criticisms that was referenced in council's motion, specifically two National Academy Sciences reports and the what's been referred to as the PCAS report. Are you familiar with those three areas?
Yes, sir. I am.
Okay, great. I'd like to ask you, let's just go in chronological order if that works for you. Beginning with the first National Academy of Sciences report in 2008. I believe it was, well, tell me are you familiar with that study?
Yes, sir. I am.
Do you recall generally what the study related to, the title or the area field that they explored?
The 2008 article from the NAS was an article by a group of researchers dealing with ballistic imaging.
if you would, and you have familiarized yourself with that report, is that correct?
I am familiar with it.
What are some of the,
That's always great when someone else is whispering in your ear. No, nothing
before
says
we
you're
go into
screwing
the
this up
reports,
by
having established
that.
the foundation for his expertise, we do request that Mr. Greer be admitted as an expert for purposes of the rest of
Nobody
this
says you know what you're doing, like someone
in
having to
the
tell
field of
you
firearms examination.
to make that
Before the
motion.
defense proceeds with, you have some questions for him? You have voir dire for this witness?
Not on his qualifications, Your Honor, for purposes of this hearing, that he is certified, I believe, under AFTE. That I don't have any questions on his qualifications.
All right, he's so qualified.
Yeah.
Shifting back then, Mr. Greer, to the first NAS, National Academy of Sciences report. The test was conducted on ballistic imaging technology, and was it critical towards that field? The general gist of it?
Yes, sir. Your Honor, may I refer to my notes?
What do you need to refer to your notes about?
Take about a 2-minute break.
This is insanity.
Yeah.
You learn this stuff in freshman research methodology and scientific writing. Firearm science is not contested, so I don't see the issue. The only science that they were contesting on certain basis was blood spatter, but firearms and ballistics has been a thing
For a long
hundreds of
time.
years. What are you doing? Why? Like, my dude. And if we had a drinking game every time we said, we'd have all died already. If you've been an expert witness at 25 trials, you should be a better public speaker than this dude.
Absolutely. The thing is he's just all he really seems to be is an academic and lab rat, and he doesn't even really qualify as a proper academic. Life sciences? Can we be more specific?
I'm not worried about that. I mean, he's just not great at getting his point across, is some of it. But some of this is just stupid. Some of this is Murdaugh has a ton of money, and Dick Harpoolian, his lawyer, has skin in the game, proverbially, and this is, one of those old money, everybody knows everybody cases, so we're going to get away with things. Syndicate, yeah, I mean, he's book smart, but one of the reasons I'm breaking this down is because I know one of the questions that comes up, because a couple people asked me about it in a different live, and he's just really bad at getting his point across, is some of it. Someone needs to teach you how to speak in public. This is ridiculous.
Well, most would-be biologists don't actually require public speaking.
He's not a biologist.
No, he's a life sciences major. Whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean.
He what? I can't hear you.
He said he was a life science. He graduated with a bachelor's of arts in life sciences.
Yeah, it's just a general science degree for somebody that doesn't know what they want to do. Clearly just health science. It's like some places use it instead of pre-med. Some places use it instead of pre-professional. It's I want to do something with science, but I don't know what science, and I don't know anything more specific than science. So it's like essentially a general education degree that you would see just for science. Just one of those. I have a degree because I needed a degree, but my degree doesn't actually mean anything. It means I can go take more classes to learn to do something useful. Uh, like when you're putting the OSHA person to sleep, we have a problem. Yeah, everybody takes public speaking, even in the U.S., is generally a general education requirement. I don't know if part of this is because he legitimately is just terrified of the implications of what they're going to try to cross him on because of what information they want thrown out, or he's just that uncomfortable, or he's an idiot, or all of the above. I mean,
Or he's been given specific instructions to do this, that, and the other thing.
I don't think that's
and
the
he's afraid he's
case.
going to fuck it up.
No, I don't think that's the case. Knowing, I know what evidence they're trying to get thrown out is the only reason I have any insight into some of this. And this is just dumb. This is just dumb with what they want thrown out.
Like
And
to showcase
why?
themselves. I mean, I'm not familiar with doing forensics on shell casings to begin with.
I will break down all of that when we get to that point in this. I will give the real explanations on like this dippity doos version because I don't want to confuse people, but my man, you're not making yourself look smart or sound smart or anything. You're not doing anything to help yourself, my guy.
You know, I took a biology course in college, and she spent the first and the teacher spent the first 2 weeks hammering the scientific method into our heads.
Yeah, well, you usually do that in like middle school or high school.
We got that. I got that in all of my high school classes too, but that's beside the point. This guy is college educated. Biology 101. Yeah, that was a thing.
I just, knowing what evidence they're going after, this whole thing is just irking me more than it normally would.
That's because you know what's going on, and he doesn't seem to, or he's somebody miseducated him.
No, nobody miseducated him. He's just Dick Harpoolian who's the defense counsel, is known for his very aggressive and not so pleasant demeanor.
Yeah.
Like he's known to be one of those piranha defense attorneys.
Oh, he's combative.
He's an ass. So let's
He
see.
makes his living being an ass.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Greer, I believe we're referring to the 2008 National Academies Report. Yes.
Okay, I can't handle this.
Could you please outline some of the criticisms that were raised by that report?
Oh, well, there's not that much. We'll see.
Extensive research during their training, looking at many microscopic comparisons, and whether or not they're issuing articles throughout their career to be peer reviewed in those journals. They are doing research in that training process, comparing known items to each other and known non-matches, looking at the difference in those. And I feel that this article, if it didn't take into that account of that human interaction, looking at that, the ballistic imaging technology may not have accounted for that.
And just in how many, do you know, or roughly how many exams or examinations or analyses have you performed in the field of firearms identification?
At this point in my career, I would say thousands of comparisons.
Okay.
All right, and concerning still on this 2008 report, was there some,
Can we just move
did
on
the issues of the report have
to
to
get to the evidentiary
amend
issues you people have?
or issue corrections on the
Because
report
this is
in
just
certain instances?
irritating.
The 2008 report was not intended to cause any issues with the admissibility of the firearm and tool mark evidence in their admissibility. There was a statement from Dr. John Rolfe, who was a member of the study, who had to address some of that information, and that the NAS report did not mean to cause that situation to occur.
All right, thank you, Mr. Greer. Shifting focus to the second NAS, we're calling it the NAS report, that was performed in 2009. Are you familiar with that report?
Yes, sir, I am.
And have you had an opportunity to review it prior to today?
I am familiar with the report.
All right, describe to us, if you would, what the nature or the substance of that report was focused on, the area that it was focused on.
The report
Let's move
was
forward and get to the
Rated
evidence.
into its field of study.
yes, sir. Part of our peer review is part of,
Let's just,
and also the code of ethics. We sign that each year as employees in the Forensic Services Laboratory. Lots of years of training to arrive at becoming a competent examiner.
Has AFTI, the organization you're a member of, have they rendered criticisms and responses to the PCAST report?
Yes, sir, they have.
And are you also familiar with the organization OSAC, OSAC?
Yes, sir, I am familiar with that.
What is that organization?
The OSAC is the organization, excuse me, of scientific area committees. That is part.
okay, well, let's go to the actual evidence
The results
issue.
of the comparisons of items 2 through
Okay, we're getting there.
If that
weaponization, excuse me.
Okay, here we go. Let's get to something actually decent by now. Let's get to the actual important thing.
One of the issues that they noted was that firearms analysis falls short of the criteria for foundational validity because there's only a single appropriately designed study to measure the reliability of firearm and tool mark analysis. The other was that they had issue with those studies and how they were designed. Another issue was brought forth to firearm and tool mark examiner
Pregnant pause.
Mm-hmm.
were the methods in which we arrive at our conclusions. That is to include the subjective and objective measures that we take to arrive at those conclusions.
Have there been criticisms of the PCAST report?
Yes, sir. There have been some criticism of that report.
Have you reviewed some of the criticisms of that report?
I have.
Do you share do you agree with the criticisms that you've reviewed?
I am familiar with some of those criticisms, and I do, as an examiner, agree with the responses by some of our scientific groups in firearm and tool market examiner.
Could you share some of the criticisms that called the validity of that report into question since its publication?
Yes, sir. Part of the one of the things with the PCAST report is the group of researchers
Hey,
who
Anthony, I'm gonna-
compiled that report.
Not that I have
None
a
of those
problem with this,
researchers had any
but
firearms
I'm going
identification
to
experience.
ask
I
we
believe,
not discuss
in
this
referencing
in
some
my
articles,
chat
that none of
just
those
because
had even worked
YouTube is
in a
going to come
forensics
down on my
laboratory.
channel.
And only 2 had claimed to have any backgrounds in forensics. So none of those people who compiled that
YouTube will
issued
strike
those,
my channel for those
those
discussions.
statements about firearm and tool mark identification even claim to have ever been in a forensics laboratory. So that is one issue. As what we do is very specific, and we undergo lots of years of training to arrive at
No,
becoming a
that's okay, guys.
competent examiner.
Just in their new
As
rules.
AFTI, the organization you're a member of, have they rendered criticisms? and
Anthony,
responses
I
to
know,
the
I'm just
PCAST
saying with the
report?
new rules,
yes, sir,
they've
they
been
have.
striking channels.
And are you also familiar with an
Even with
organization, the
careful phrasing.
organization OSAC, OSAC?
Yes, sir, I am familiar with that.
What is that organization?
The OSAC is the organization, excuse me, of scientific area committees. That is part of a committee that each forensic discipline has a group in, and that is a committee that's within NIST, which is a federal scientific organization.
You mentioned the committee NIST, that's NIST,
Yes, sir.
and that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Yes, sir, I believe so.
And is your understanding that that's a federal organization as well?
Yes, sir.
So OSAC is under the umbrella of the NIST organization?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you, the court's indulgence.
Let's just discuss evidence pertaining to this actual case.
Yes,
Questions
please.
I have, Your Honor. Certainly happy to hand over to defense counsel. Mr. Greer, thank you.
Mr. Griffin?
Good afternoon, Mr. Greer. Or Agent Greer, I apologize. You mentioned that you have been qualified to testify as an expert in some 25 cases, courtrooms like this.
Yes, sir, I have.
25.
And in this case, isn't it true that there is no weapon that you were able to test to see whether these, well, let me strike that. You were able to test a weapon of a 300 blackout type to see if that weapon, shell casings and other, I guess the bullet, if you will, projectile match what was found at the crime scene. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I did receive fired cartridge cases and projectiles to compare to a rifle.
And you use the methodology of the AFTE to perform the test. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. And also our SLED firearm department manual, which is a document that I would follow to conduct those examinations.
And I believe that in that 300 blackout that you used was found in the gun room at the house of Moselle. Were you aware of that?
I am not sure the location. I would have to check the submission paperwork to the laboratory.
He would.
In any event, you were
He wouldn't know. It
provided the
doesn't matter
firearm
where it was
item
found.
33, I think. In your
It
report,
doesn't matter
and
where
you
it's all
testified
found.
and compared it to what you
All that's
provided
matters is
indicated
did it
that
match
came
or
from the
not?
scene. Is that right?
Yes, sir. May I refer to my report?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
All that matters is if it matches, not where it was found.
Why is he answering that?
Nor does he really care where it was found.
Well, he shouldn't. Not unless he was out in the field with it.
One court's exhibit, for your honor.
Hey, Matthew.
And it is attached to our motion.
Auto corrupt. Was that someone just?
Agent Greer, I believe you have identified item 33 in your report as one Palmetto State Armory Model
Anthony, they shouldn't
PA-15
be. This is
semi-automatic
just being
rifle, 300
stupid.
blackout caliber. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in your report, it said that this rifle was test fired using the item 34 magazine. And during the test firing, the first available cartridge in the magazine was fed and chambered correctly. And that then you test fired and extracted and ejected from the rifle. How were you able to,
I don't know what you're
I
talking
guess,
about, Matt.
exclude or maybe your result was inconclusive that item 33 did not fire did not extract and eject the spent cartridges found at the
Okay,
scene.
here's where we get
And
into trouble.
your analysis is in item 128 of your report.
As far as the cartridge cases from the scene, which items are you referring to?
Well, the ones that were seized from the scene are items 2 through 7.
Okay. Yes, sir. The results of the comparisons of items 2 through 7 in my report, when I compared those with each other in test cartridge cases that I fired from that item 33 rifle, the results of those comparisons were inconclusive. That means I am unable to determine whether those items were fired by item 33 or by another firearm with similar characteristics.
And then you also, as my understanding, you matched up spent shell casings, items 2 through 7, with other spent shell cartridges or casings, specifically items 35 through 37, 39, 108, 113, 116, and 17, and 122. And then you concluded, what did you conclude with regard to that analysis?
Yes, sir. I conclude that matching individual identifying characteristics were found in the mechanism marks of items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 113, 116 through 117, and 122 to conclude that those items had been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
Now, is it clear that you did not have the firearm that that your opinion is was used to extract and eject those cartridges?
I am able to determine that those cartridge cases had matching mechanism marks listed there, but in comparisons with the item 33 rifle, I'm unable to determine if they have been fired by that rifle or not.
Okay, but let me ask you, what's your opinion with regard to the spent shell cartridges, items 2 through 7, with the other spent shell cartridges you identified?
Which cartridge cases?
We're just going to repeat the same
35
answer
through
over and
37,
over.
39,
because we don't know
108,
how to
113,
communicate.
116, and 17, and 122.
It's my opinion that those all had matching mechanism marks. Another common term you may hear for that is cycling. So that means that those cartridge cases at some point had been cycled through the same firearm at one point in time. I was using the marks made from those, the extractor, the ejector, and other chamber marks, the lug marks to make that identification. So those cartridge cases, I'm able to say have been cycled through the same firearm at some point in time, but as results of comparisons with the item 33 rifle, with items 2 through 7, those at the scene, the results of those comparisons were inconclusive as having been fired by.
So I'm a little confused. You were saying that let me ask you, how can you get ejector and extractor marks from one firearm at a previous time? I mean, can you do it without firing the bullet? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to stop him here. So let's explain what this big part of this issue is. He is saying that the rifle he was given was the same caliber rifle as the one with the casings and bullets in question. But when they're asking him can you conclusively, with 100% certainty, say it came from this gun? So okay. So I'm going to break it down, and then if you guys don't understand something, just stop me. So what they're saying is, okay, hey, were these shell casings and these unspent rounds, can you with a degree of certainty tell me that they were fired by this particular rifle that was found on scene? And he's sitting here saying, well, no, but I can tell they were in the same weapon at some point, but I can't with any degree of certainty tell you that that's what fired it. And they're going to ask this question over and over. What he's not explaining well, and what Dippity do over here is confused by. So I can't do it on live stream. I can videotape a short on it at some point. You guys can look at my other videos. If you take a magazine, load bullets into the magazine. Matt, I'll get there. So you load the bullets into the magazine. Then you unload the magazine. The magazine itself is going to leave unique markings on the casing. Not only is that going to happen, if I load a magazine, I put it into, we'll just say one of my pistols, and I pull the slide back and chamber around, right? And then we'll go with my Ruger as an example. I decock it so that I have a round in the chamber and all I have to do is pull the trigger. And later, I go ahead and forget and I rack my slide again, it will eject the cartridge. Because it was not fired, it will eject an unspent round. So if you pick it up off the ground, it's fine. It's an unspent round. But if you look at it with a microscope, you will see it has a marking on it from the ejector because it was still ejected out of the weapon. So, hey, J. Michael. So what he is getting at is all of these rounds and casings have the same extractor marks and have the same markings that the magazine would leave. But I can't tell you if that's the rifle that fired it. Well, that's because if I take a pistol, fill the magazine up, and just sit there and cycle through and rack my slide over and over and over until every one of those rounds that is in that magazine is ejected without me firing them, I just cycle them through, they will all have extractor markings. They will all have markings from the same magazine. Now, if I go and load those into another magazine for a weapon of the same caliber and actually do fire it, and somebody picks up the shell casing, you with no degree of certainty can tell me if the ejector marks, the extractor marks, the magazine marks, which weapon fired that bullet and fired that round. Was it the one that I cycled it through? Or was it the one that it was actually fired out of? So instead of explaining it as all of these bullets were cycled through the same weapon at some point in time, but I cannot differentiate which one ultimately fired it because the marks overlap and you have two sets of markings on one bullet or cartridge casing or whatever, you can't say which came first, the chicken or the egg. And he's not doing a good job explaining that. He is just going to repeat this same, well, the markings were consistent, so I can say they've all been in the same one at some point or cycled through. But I can't tell you if they were actually fired instead of explaining it that way.
The cycling marks sometimes could occur just from cycling through the firearm. For instance, if you were to load a cartridge into a magazine or cartridges into a magazine, load that magazine into a firearm and chamber that unfired cartridge into the chamber of the gun so it's in battery, ready to fire. If you decide not to fire that weapon, you may, in this case, it was a rifle, pull back on that bolt handle. In that case, in that instance, the unfired cartridge would be extracted from the chamber of that gun and ejected. There can be marks left on an unfired cartridge due to that process without having firing the cartridge.
So what level of certainty do you have as to the fact that, in your opinion, that items 2 through 7 were loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time as items 35 through 37, 39, 108, 113, 116 through 17, and 122? What's your level of certainty?
That is my conclusion. After I examined the evidence, I arrived at that conclusion based on the years of extensive training, looking at thousands of comparisons, and basing that conclusion upon that. If I thought it could have been a different answer, it could have been inconclusive, but I was able to determine that the agreement that I saw on those items was sufficient enough to determine that they had been cycled through the same environment some previous time.
Do you hold that opinion with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
It's my opinion that those had matching mechanism marks.
Well, they have matching mechanism marks, but are you able to state with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that only one weapon in the entire universe would have produced those matching marks?
Based on all of the markings and tool marks and cartridge case and fire bullets that I've looked at in my career, I have examined and conducted thousands of comparisons. I've participated in
This dude is
studies
just
and
trying to
competencies
skirt
that,
around
in which I look
having
at
actually answered.
things to determine if they were fired by a particular firearm, and able to build a foundation in which I can base my opinion. And it's my opinion that based on that training, based on those studies I participated in, some of those included consecutively rifle barrels, consecutively manufactured slides, and I successfully passed those, that based on the information there, after I examined those cartridge cases for those markings, it's my opinion that those items all have shared matching mechanism marks and have been loaded into, extracted, or ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
Are you aware of any studies that have ever been done on the 300 blackout?
300 blackout is a newer caliber. I'm not aware at this point in time. I'm sure there may have been research, but I do not have research with me today on cartridge cases of that caliber.
Are you familiar with how the 300 blackout is manufactured?
With basic manufacturing processes, yes, sir, I suppose so.
Right, and so, and in fact, some company or gunsmith will assemble a 300 blackout from component parts using the various component parts that are mass produced. Is that correct?
You people.
Are we talking about component parts of the rifle?
Yes, sir.
Different manufacturers choose to make their parts, or they can have those supplied by other vendors. Yes, sir, I suppose so.
Do you know how the 300, well, do you know how any of the 300 blackouts that Mr. Murdaugh purchased for his son, Paul, were manufactured, where they were purchased, how they were assembled?
I do not have information as to how they were purchased or assembled.
Nor why he
Are
would,
you familiar with production lots?
That's not his job.
How, say, rifle barrels are produced in a production lot, production.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and are you familiar with any studies that have concluded that projectiles fired through rifle barrels produced in the same production lot have identical markings?
I am familiar with certain studies. Some of those I participated in as part of my training that are known around the United States and internationally, that consisted of those consecutively rifle barrels. That means that they were made by a tool at the same approximate time in the same set of wear. I've also done those studies with cartridge cases, looking at the consecutively manufactured breech faces. And we as firearms examiners are aware of those markings. And in those studies, they're conducted because in the fireman tool mark identification world, if you will, if we are expecting to see the carryover of those
This
markings,
isn't,
we
they're
would
not
expect
talking
to see
about the
that.
round,
On
they're not talking
tools that are
about the
made,
bullets
or excuse me, on
themselves.
barrels that
Talking
are
about
rifled
markings
consecutively,
on the
those
casings.
breech faces that are manufactured consecutively. That's when that tool is passing over that surface one after another. And I've conducted those studies, such as the Brandon 10 barrel test, the Hamby breech face test, the Glock Evis barrels, which all have consecutively manufactured items within them. And I was able to distinguish between those items and looking at them under the microscope, evaluating those characteristics that are exhibited on those fired components, and correctly identify and associate those with the correct information.
And there we're talking about, I guess, what do you call the inside of the barrel of a pistol or rifle, correct?
Yes, so that would be the bore of the barrel.
The bore of the barrel. Are you familiar with any studies with regard to what you relied upon here, which would be extractor and ejector marks?
Yes, sir. I believe there are studies that have shown the reproducibility of those markings, and how firearms examiners were able to distinguish between those manufactured components.
And are you familiar with any studies of the component parts that were used in 300 blackouts?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Are you familiar with any
Oh, my
studies that
Lord.
were done on the extractor and
Why do they
ejector component
always
parts
pick the worst
that are
public
used in a 300
speakers?
blackout assembly?
I don't have any information with me today in regards to the 300 blackout, but all those components are machined in similar ways. They all have similar manufacturing processes. And I have demonstrated throughout my training that I was able to distinguish between those consecutively manufactured parts. So just because it may be a 300 blackout, if I may have done that, it's something similar, such as in those tests with the Ruger pistol or the Glock pistol. And it was able to distinguish, even though they may share similar manufacturing techniques. I don't have an article with me here today in regards to specific to that caliber, but based on my knowledge of the manufacturing process and fireman tool mark identification, I would expect to be able to rely on that information as being reliable to examine that caliber.
Now, as I understand it, you examined the, I guess, spent cartridges under microscope, and you compared items 2 through 7 with the others to conclude they matched. Is that correct?
I was able to say that items 2 through 7 had the matching mechanism marks.
Now, what matching mechanism marks are you referring to?
Those would be marks
The
that are
extractor.
from the ejector or extractor. That could include the chamber marks or lug marks that we see on that type caliber ammunition.
And are those the only marks that you saw that matched?
Based on
You're
my
not, Anthony. I'll explain in a minute.
examination, those are the marks that I was able to conclude that matched. When I looked at the totality of that cartridge, that fired cartridge case, excuse me, to look at the firing pin or breech face marks, I was unable to determine that if it was fired by the item 33 rifle or by another rifle that was similar.
Okay, so no, Anthony, you're not done. So, what they're trying to do is one of the theories with this case is that there was a misfire in this one rifle, and that's why there were two different um, weapons used to kill the wife and son, one being a rifle, one being a shotgun. And they found several unfired rounds at the scene. So those rounds have the markings, and they're trying to argue that you can't prove this came from this gun or anything like that. But all he's testifying to is at some point it was cycled through the same weapon. But no, he can't. And all I have to say is yes, I can say with a high degree of certainty it was cycled through the same weapon.
He did say
Can
that.
he say for sure which one fired it? No. Again, because you have overlapping marks at that point. So, you know, you can say with a high degree of certainty, he's just not sure enough of himself to. And the problem is these rounds were cycled through. And one of the things they're trying to get out is, and again, some of this has to do with people just being crappy at teaching. They keep harping on the caliber for a specific reason. Krakow, do you know why?
Because there's probably a dearth of actual studies concerning this.
No. So the 300 blackout is the parent. So remember, I've talked about on my channel. If you're new to my channel, hi, I'm a gun nerd. There's something called a parent caliber.
Yeah, you're right.
So which means you take a parent caliber gun. So and then you tweak the bullet to make it a slightly different caliber, but it's the same size and it's not an original casing. 300 blackout is a 7.62 NATO round.
Right.
That they've done. So they're harping on this because I can take a 300 blackout round and I can cycle it through a rifle that's an M16 that's meant for the 7.62 NATO rounds.
Uh-huh.
I can cycle it through that all day long. The only thing you need to change to make that be able to fire the 300 blackout is the barrel. The lower and everything else are identical. So you can cycle it through a weapon that would never be able to fire it because the barrel hasn't been changed. But it would give you extractor marks.
The same extractor marks.
Yes.
When you change,
So
that's why the bullet itself is kind of the important part.
Right. So that's part of the problem is they're not explaining why the fact that it's a 300 blackout and something that has a very common parent caliber is important. And that's where they're going to go with this. They are going to go with, you can't say that gun is the one that fired it. They are going to go with, you have with no degree of certainty, can you prove X, Y, or Z? They can, but he doesn't know how to explain it. And I don't think he understands enough about ballistics to be able to read ahead and say and see why they are harping on the caliber so much.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Anthony, does that make sense to you? Because I'm going to hit play, and if you guys still have questions, just keep adding them. This guy just needs to learn to explain better some of this.
I'm sorry. This guy is killing me.
The mechanisms that you
No
say match,
syndicate, not a ghost gun.
how many points did you conclude match in order to reach your opinion that there was in fact a match?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
when you compare tool marks, how many specific markings on an item do you need to find?
This isn't
that
like
match
fingerprints
in
where
order
you say it's an
to say that
8-point identification.
it's a match?
That's
Yes,
not
sir.
a thing.
At SLED, we use a process of pattern matching. So in that pattern matching, we are comparing the surface contours of those tool marks to each other. Pattern matching is the worldwide accepted method for fireman tool mark.
Okay. Again, my man needs to learn short answers. Don't expand on what he's asking. Just answer the question and nothing more. Stop.
Also, we do not wish to hear a bunch of qualifications for a 35th time.
But that's not it. He's giving extra information.
Mhm.
But what he's having a difficult time with is just answering the question. All you have to do is answer the question. So the gentleman asked about numbers of points. Because in fingerprint identification, you say, I have an 11-point match, which means I found 11 unique characteristics that match. So the likelihood of it being someone else is very low. There is no standardized number, and he's talking about pattern matching. I have a microscope, a stereo microscope, and essentially with my microscope, if I put two casings on it and pull them up, it's two separate microscopes. I can then on a computer screen pull them up and line them up and kind of slide it back and forth to see if all the tool marks match, or if ones don't, if there's additional one's missing. But all he keeps talking about is pattern matching and not explaining this isn't a point number system match like you do with fingerprints. He is opening himself up to be torn down, but he also does not know how to answer questions appropriately.
Bad preparation. His
No,
boss-
it's not even bad preparation. It's because this isn't like something you prep a witness. This is like you need to go take public speaking classes. You need to be taught how to answer these questions and how to foresee what they want.
Identification. So we're in line with other laboratories, in forensic laboratories with fireman tool mark identification, to conduct those comparisons using that pattern matching method.
And how many marks make up a pattern? That's SLED.
There's not a policy for counting those lines, as we rely on the pattern matching method, which is accepted throughout our field.
So
So
you
how
determine
hard is
whether
it to
it's
give the answer that I
pattern,
just gave?
or
That
is
makes
there
so
a
much more
standard that
sense.
you go to measure to say, oh, there's this, and this, so it meets the definition of pattern.
Based on all my training experience, looking at those thousands of comparisons, looking at items in which I know match, looking at the agreement that's seen there between
Stop.
those two items, I'm looking at items
No,
that were known non-matches, looking at any agreement that may be there,
he's a
Uh,
lawyer, not a scientist.
and evaluating those characteristics throughout
Stop.
the course of my training, looking at all of those. I use
Stop
that
with repeating that
to
sentence. I'm
base
going
my
to rename you
opinion
Elaine.
on that in regards to those 2 through 7 that they had matching mechanisms.
So do I understand you correctly that there's no standard that you rely upon to determine whether a pattern exists?
I use the pattern matching method based on the extensive comparisons
He is
that I conducted,
asking you a very
looking
simple
at
question.
the
Give him a
literature,
very simple
participating in
answer.
those studies
Stop
in order to determine that I can
giving
evaluate the difference
a
between the
soliloquy.
different characteristics that are exhibited on the items, as well as the quality control procedures that's led that help to ensure that we're issuing a quality product in our results.
So you know it when you see it, but does someone review above you to cross-check to say whether he or she agrees with your pattern analysis? Access is SLED.
Yes, sir, absolutely. every case that we work that's led to issue a conclusion is 100% micro verified. So that means I look at the evidence, I examine it under the comparison microscope, look at all those characteristics and features, and arrive at my conclusions, whether things I'm able to identify or inclusive or even eliminate. I come up with those conclusions and write those conclusions down. It's at that time that another court qualified examiner.
Okay, dude, my man. I know I'm a tiny little channel and I only have like 700 and something subscribers, but I think I explained it better than you can. Okay, I think I did, and I think I made it much quicker. All you need to say is there is no set number. Unlike with fingerprints, there is no standard number, but there were no marks that ruled it out. That's it. All you need to say is there's no set number. And when they're like, well, how's their verification? Well, we're micro this, and then someone else. All you need to say is, once I've made my determination, a second certified examiner makes an independent, independently analyzes it. He's not a police officer. He's not even a crime scene analyst. All he does is ballistics, which is pathetic. Yeah, I do it. I come to my conclusions, and then it's given to somebody, and they independently come to their own conclusions, and then we compare to see if they match. That's not a hard statement to come out with. Why you're taking us on this Elaine level soliloquy about muffins? This is the muffin argument.
She was cool.
This is the muffin argument again.
Oh God, no, really? Oh no.
We're getting into muffin territory with this guy.
Comes behind and reviews the evidence as well. They look at all the evidence on the microscope.
I answered this entire thing in 2 sentences.
Why
are you still talking?
Independently and arrive at their own conclusions. If he or she agrees with my conclusions, and they're able to sign off on those conclusions, and the process of issuing that report is continued. So that's part of our quality control process that each
Tony, probably not. At least not yet.
Another component of that is once he or she agrees or disagrees with that conclusion, the report will undergo a technical administrative review as well as the case to ensure that quality product.
Does the reviewer, he or she who reviews your work, know of your conclusions before they review?
No, sir. We have a blind
want to know.
So they do not know our results.
And who reviewed your work and the analysis in this case that's Court's Exhibit Number 1?
The reviewer for this case was Chad Smith.
Does his name appear on this report that I'm overlooking?
His name would not appear on the report, as I'm the one issuing the report. His name would be included in the case file documenting his agreement with my conclusions.
Okay. And you're saying Mr. Smith would not have available to him your conclusions before he was
that was going to happen
at the shell kitchens?
That's correct.
Now, can you say, well, let me ask you, have you ever rendered opinion in court that you have here today that just looking at shell casings without having a firearm to test that they came from the same firearm?
I believe I have, yes, sir.
You more than one?
And there you go, speaking like a whoopsie.
I'm unable to recall about how many reports I've issued based on the cycling marks.
Sure.
I believe I have issued a report like that in the past.
That's not what he asked.
Where I was able to look at those
Dude,
court cases, and I don't remember the details of the case, whether there was a gun involved or not.
So I'm asking, actually testified in a court of law, not just issuing a report. Do you recall ever offering testimony in a court of law that you have here today, that just looking at spent shell casings on tool mechanisms, that you've concluded they were fired from the same weapon?
I've testified in court approximately
They've been
25
in
times
that weapon.
regarding my conclusions. In regards just to, if you're discussing mechanism marks, I would have to.
No, idiot. He is asking you, how many times have you testified in court that that 2 bullets were fired from the same weapon without having the weapon present? So how many cases out of your 25 did you not recover a weapon, but you were able to take the spent shell casings, look at them, and then go, oh, yeah, these have all of the same extractor, ejector and firing pin and magazine markings. So they came from the same weapon without me having the weapon. That's what he's asking you, okay? That's all he's asking you. He's asking you, can you do this without the weapon present? Please stop.
Cop,
To recall and check a file. I don't know off the top of my head, but I have testified in court approximately 25 times to my
we
conclusions
know.
that I've issued in a report in regards to firearm and tool mark identification.
25 times, we know.
Earlier, you're talking about reports. How many times do you think you've ever issued a report where you concluded, just based upon your analysis of the spent shell cartridges, that
Casing, not cartridge.
cartridges were loaded and extracted from the same weapon at some previous time?
I don't have that number with me today.
Is this an uncommon conclusion, or is this something you do fairly regularly?
It's not uncommon. Our ultimate goal in firearms is to identify or eliminate. And in this case, I was unable to identify several of those cartridge cases, as I have that inconclusive result. But in looking at the information, those characteristics on that cartridge, on those cartridge cases, I was able to determine that conclusion and look at those markings and the totality of those areas around the cartridge case to say that those items had been cycled through the firearm at some time.
Can you said you were unable to match the spent shell casings with item 33? Is that correct?
No, he was unable to
Yes,
say
sir. Item 33
with
was the
certainty.
rifle.
And that was the rifle provided to you. Were you aware that rifle was purchased about the same time as another rifle for son Paul, and that was stolen?
I don't know the history of these rifles or how they were recovered or obtained.
And you
can
don't
you-
need to. You
Is
want
there
to
any way
remain
for you to tell,
objective. So
what
Keep
year
moving.
rifle you're referring to in your report, where you say there's matching mechanism marks that were loaded into and extracted from the same firearm? Until that was a 2017 300 or 18, 19, 20?
No, sir, I'm not able to date the firearm.
Now, you were asked about the various criticisms by the NAS, and that's the National Academy of Science. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And the criticisms in your field, and they were specifically criticizing the organization to which you adhere to, the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners, correct?
Our organization issued a response into to those articles. Yes, sir.
Okay, and you said that that SLED continued on and did they make any adjustments? Of course, this was before you became the 2009 report was issued before you started at SLED in your capacity. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I was hired on at SLED in 2014, so I'm unaware of the past of what may have been completed, and I was signed off to conduct firearms examinations in approximately 2017, I believe.
And then there was the report issued by the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology in 2016, and you testified about that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think you cited to the language that we included that the firearm analysis field still falls short of scientific criteria for foundational validity. Is that right? That's their criticism?
Yes, sir. I believe that was their criticism.
And one of the specific criticisms was that the AFTE's theory of identification that two tool marks have a common origin when their firearms are in sufficient agreement is circular. That the AFTE declares that an examiner may state that two tool marks have a common origin when their features are in sufficient agreement, and that then defines sufficient agreement as occurring when the examiner considers it a practical impossibility that the tool marks have different origins. Isn't that what you have done in this case?
I have applied the AFTE theory of identification to my identification process. However, that AFTE theory, as presented by the PCAS, doesn't take into effect the full entire theory. They make it seem that circular way when in fact the sufficient agreement threshold that we're looking for as examiners is exhibited, again, when we are looking at those items and those tool marks, so that the amount of agreement is greater than...
Sir, all you need to say is it is one part of many for us to make this determination.
Right.
We are not doing this in isolation. It is used as a part. That's not that hard to say. Please
Apparently
stop
it is.
with the soliloquy.
Apparently it is that difficult because this guy still has not figured out how to deal with this.
Right, but here's the problem. This is why people are asking me about this case. Like, that's why I got like 9 million messages. Because nobody understands, A, what they're looking for, and B, what this idiot was going on and on about. And I can tell you, what the defense is trying to do right here is they're trying to call into question the firearms and the ballistics analysis as non-scientific along with blood spatter. Because if they can get those thrown out, then a lot of the evidence in the case would be thrown out. So that's what they're going after.
But don't they actually have the weapons in question?
They have weapons in that caliber, but like they said, 2 of these rifles in the Rainer Blackout were purchased at the same time by the Murdaughs. One of them was stolen.
Okay.
So what they're trying to do is get at, can you tell me with what degree of certainty and prove that it wasn't the other one that would have been bought that was next off the line that didn't fire these? That's what they're trying to get at.
Well, you'd probably still have 2 sets of tool marks because you're not going to be able to load them. If it's only 1 set of tool marks, it only went through 1 rifle.
No. What he's saying is, can you tell me it was the rifle that was found on scene and not the rifle that was stolen that came off the line immediately before or after this rifle? Because they used to own 2 that came off the production line in order. 1 was stolen. They're trying to pin it on, well, could this round, because it came out of a rifle that would have had all the exact same parts and was the next in the line manufactured on that line and that was then stolen, could that have been the one that fired it? They're trying to create doubt with that.
They're doing a fairly good job at this point, or at least for the average monkey.
But they're not. The only reason they're doing a good job of it is because Dick Harpootlian is like, I mean, a very experienced lawyer, but B, it's because Elmer Fudd over here can't figure out how to explain things.
Well, and this guy here, seriously, where was my brain going with that? Because even with the smallest amount of tolerance, you're going to see little bits of difference, even in two parts made with the same tool, made with the same dies.
Yeah,
I can put
and
two objects on a lathe, one right next to another,
there's
and
always a difference.
they're always just the smallest of differences, and that will throw things off.
Right, but he doesn't know how to answer this, is the problem. He's not good at answering this.
Yeah,
So,
you are never, ever, ever going to get two parts that are exactly the same. When you're trying
right.
to your
And he
rifle
doesn't sit.
with interchangeable parts,
And our
you-
best known
you're-
matches that we've ever
what
seen.
you're actually
Literature
getting
in our studies based on
is
peer review.
something within a certain
And
tolerance.
other methods, that the agreement is greater than what's seen in the best known non-matches, in a consistent agreement with what's seen in known matches. And to help us arrive at that, we're looking at
Okay, we're done. We're done listening to him. So, he has nothing else useful to say. So the problem is they have a crappy firearms expert that doesn't know how to explain things. So that's going to go well.
Firearms expert that does not know how to expert.
We're back to New Mexico.
Yep.
We're back to New Mexico, guys. Back to New Mexico. So that's the evidence. A ruling has not been made yet on it.
I'll bet you 3-1 that Emily D. Baker is going, "Ooh, I like this guy."
She already did a short on it, and she already covered this, and she does have a short on it. I haven't watched her short on it. I
I
should.
wasn't able to watch her short. I'm going to try it again soon.
Yeah, she ran like this a really short like little thing. I'd have to look, but so that's essentially the issue. Okay, this guy just doesn't know what he's breaking down. So I appreciate all 12 of you that are still here for that long and painful listening to that gentleman. Do the like, subscribe, share the YouTubey things, and I will see you guys tomorrow and figure out what I'm streaming and what we're all going to talk about tomorrow. And if like, subscribe, share this out to people. If you have any other questions or you come up with any other questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments to this video because it stays up, and I'll make sure I address them tomorrow in a Lair Live. But all my beasties, all the love and hugs in the world, have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow. Good night, my loves.
Night night.